We've got an event coming up on the 22nd, so that's a Tuesday. It's Quest for Quality of Life event. It will be at First National. Let's see, what does it say here? First National Bank Community Room in Jonesboro, Tuesday, October 22nd, from 6:30 to 8. And there will be several guest speakers there. One of them is Pastor Iverson Jackson, who's the senior pastor of Zoe Bible Church in Little Rock. And he is, many of you out there have listened to him, heard him in conservative circles. He's very, very dynamic. And he joins us on the phone right now. Pastor Iverson Jackson, how are you this morning?
I'm doing great, Paul. How are you today?
I am doing well, sir. I really appreciate you spending some time with us. So I read that this event that you're going to be speaking at again on Tuesday it has to do with community leaders discussing their thoughts on quality of life for individuals, for families, for communities. So what's appealing to this event for you? What do you plan to discuss?
Well, we're going to talk about how that quality of life can, how people can experience that on an individual, community, group level, and, how to do that. And, I look at it like this, Paul, when I think in terms of quality of life and what that means to us as an individual and what it can mean to a community, and just reflect back on my own life. And you just don't know what you don't know. And until you are exposed to something better, then, sometimes people think they really have a great quality of life. But until you're exposed or made aware of things that are better, you don't really strive. Many people won't strive to have a better life. And then there are those that just don't know that you can. And there are many opportunities, particularly, you're talking about, we're in America. This is America. We are the light for the world, if you will. So why should anyone in this country live a lower standard when higher standards are available for us? And that's what we're going to be talking about. And just letting the people know what are things that you can shoot for, and they're very obtainable in this country.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, is it kind of geared towards people from from all socioeconomic backgrounds, or
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. I'm 57 years of age, not old. 57 years of age, and the first house that we lived in, Paul. Now I'll say it like this, a little crude, but let me say it like this: first house that we lived in, my parents, my mother and her husband bought a house in 1972. It was the first house that we lived in that had running water. Now you can figure out what all goes along with that, so I'll just leave it at that. That had running water, so our standard of living went up substantially. Now, here's the thing, is I never considered, when you reflect back as a child, of course, I didn't think that we were poor. And I didn't know that we were poor until someone told us that we were poor. Now, my mother always strived to do better. But as a child, I didn't know, because I was happy, I was fed, I had shelter. But there certainly was a higher standard of living, which, having water in the house is much higher standard of living than not having water. So I know we don't have those extremes today as such, but there's a higher standard of living that we can all obtain if we're willing to work for it.
Do you think we kind of take, that's an interesting aspect. I think sometimes we take for granted, how far we've come in terms of that. And we are obviously all trying to, I feel like what the government's responsibility is certainly increasing. What we expect, what some people expect, maybe not me, I'm a pretty small government guy, but a lot of people expect government to do just more and more and more and more stuff, whether it's, I don't know, building water parks now, that's apparently a big deal, versus other public works projects.
Well, Paul, did you notice I did not mention government in there?
Yes.
I did not mention government in there. My mother still lives in that house. She's been there now for 47 years in that house. Same community, pretty stable community. And the reason, there's another guy that grew up in the community there, and one day we ran into each other and started talking about the old times, back in the early 70s when we moved there in 1972, when my parents moved there. And this is part of quality of life. We were talking about the community then. We said, wow, that community has been stable for all these years, almost a half a century. And we thought about, okay, there were 62 houses there, and all but about, 5 houses, maybe five, families had a man and a woman, or a mother and a father, if you will, living there in that home. And you had a family, intact families that made that community stable, and is still stable, and provided that higher quality of life than a lot of the people that live around us, outside of that little community. So when you're talking about quality of life, it's not just the material things, we know that make a quality of life, but a stable families, intact families. Now, if you want to talk about the government, that's where the government came in and kind of lowered the quality of life by dividing families up. And so, no, we don't look to government to improve our quality of life.
Well, okay, we're talking, folks, if you're just joining us, we're talking to the senior pastor of Zoe Bible Church in Little Rock. His name's Iverson Jackson. I think that's such an important point that you just made, the idea of the disintegration of the American family. And
yes, sir.
I feel like, the more that occurs, the more people do look to government to try to fix that problem. And I bet as a pastor, you would argue that, maybe while the government might do some good things here and there with that, I mean, that's something that needs to be fixed by, personal relationships with other people. And that's best found with, sending people from biblical churches, into communities to love on folks, right? I mean, that
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And the government does have its place. We know that. I mean, it better have its place because we pay taxes.
Yeah.
So certainly there is a role there, and that may be in the form of grants and things to help build infrastructure so that these communities can be built. But after that, their hands really should be out of that and allow, people who know how to put families together, help keep families together, like the church and other community groups that specialize in that. Intact. You just can't beat an intact home, whatever else you come up with. And we've seen government housing, when government tries to get into the housing business, or the government is in the housing business. We know what that looks like, and that's not what. As a matter of fact, no community wants to live beside government housing. That's sad to say, because it's like saying those people aren't as good as we are, and we know that's not the truth. We're all the same in God's sight, so that's not it. But we know what is the issue is when you have single-parent homes, and this is not, my opinion. We now have 60 years of statistics to prove that this is correct. When you have single-parent homes, it's just a much, much more difficult, because that's not God's design.
Oh, yeah.
In that single-family home. So when we talk about quality of life and experiencing that, then we're talking about, the whole thing, not just material upgrade.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not. Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. The Heritage Foundation and other organizations, they look at poverty and stuff like that, and they say this is not just simply a lack of material things. You look at the relationships that maybe just are not there, that are disintegrated, falling apart all around them. That also seems to be a thing. Let me ask you this, Pastor Jackson. So as a pastor, I kind of have a question: which came first, the chicken or the egg? Now there are some people that say, okay, that the reason government welfare exploded, or this new mission, was because churches were not doing their job, taking care of the poor and everything else. And so then there was a need, and the government was forced to step in. And then there are other people that maybe don't see it that way, that the church was doing this, and the government kind of supplanted them in the way of, if a church is being charitable towards this person or that person, and they're continuing to make mistakes, they're continuing to just kind of not listen, then at some point you pull back. But the government pretty much has a one-size-fits-all, and you can end up with generational dependency. So what are your thoughts as a pastor looking at the history of America? Was the church failing, and is that why government stepped in, or is it something different?
No, the church was not failing. I think the church once the government stepped in, I think the church did say, "Oh, okay, we got some relief here." But no, the church wasn't failing because let me say this: it's not the church's responsibility to take care of people. It's the church's well, from the standpoint of putting them in houses and things like that. It's the church's responsibility to teach them how to take care of themselves and how to provide for their families and how to properly, keep a family intact and start a family. You think about it like this. You know, and I know that if you are a teenager, and you have a child, we're talking about this day and time, not 100 years ago when that wasn't unusual. When you have a child, it's much more difficult to do anything. You kind of have a setback from the very beginning. So when you're talking about the government's responsibility versus the churches is a lifelong, because you're teaching that person from the time they come into this world to be, holding the biblical standards. Now, if someone doesn't like that, then I can't help that one way or another as far as that's concerned. But the biblical standards have proven, meaning that you hold off until with certain relationships until you are married and established. Now that you just can't beat that formula there. And I think the government, whether it was maniacal or not, I think it was, came in with a plan to say we can help you, but you have to do this. And like I know, if the government comes in, there's always a hitch, always without exception, 100%. Now, here's the thing. Think about this. When I ask people, when Dr. King, the March on Washington, and all those things took place, what was it about? What was it about? And folks would say, equal rights and all these things. I said, no, go back and look at it and think about, really, look at the signs that were there at the march. Look at what were they saying? Jobs. They were not saying handouts. When Dr. King was killed, 1968, in Memphis, Tennessee, what was he there about? Jobs. Dr. King was not saying, give us housing, give us this, give us that. He was saying, give us an equal opportunity to get a job, and we'll provide the rest for ourselves because our God is able to take care of us. And that's where the message got twisted after he was, gone off the scene. He was not begging for handouts. That was not it at all, in the least bit. It was the March on Washington for jobs.
Well, let me ask you about this. What was the last question, because we're running out of time. We're talking with Pastor Iverson Jackson. In that vein, I mean, with the President Donald Trump, what he's been doing, right now we have record low unemployment in the African American community. I mean, are you surprised by that?
No, I'm not, because Donald Trump, remember during the debate, one of the debates, and he just really kind of quelched the whole group when he said, I'm the only one on this stage that has created jobs. So it's something he knows how to do. And if you look at his record, you don't have to, again, you don't have to take anyone's word. Just go back and look at his record. And he's been doing this. His company years and years ago, when their makeup was 25% minority, and they weren't just ground pounders, through the system. So no, he's a man who knows how to create jobs, and he always paid his employees a good, fair wage, not the minimum wage, but a good, fair wage. So no, I'm not surprised about that at all, and no one should be. The man is a billionaire. He knows how to create wealth.
So
and you do that by helping other people.
There are some people saying that there's going to be a new record set in 2020 in terms of how many African Americans, the percentage that are going to vote for Donald Trump. Do you think it may be a record?
I do. I really do. And not everybody that you talk to are willing to come forth, and say, I support President Trump like me, and I respect that. That's fine, because what's more important is what you do in the voting booth. And as I talk, I'm a small business owner. I deal with a lot of other small business owners, minority, all different types, but we're speaking to this respect. So, and they like what's taking place. They like, the work picking up and contracts picking up. So, yeah, why would you go backwards when you're moving forward? That doesn't make sense at all. We have to look at the numbers. We can't go by our feelings or what somebody else thinks. man, when you got to meet a contract, you don't care what color a person is. You want to know what they're gonna do, if the policies they're putting in place are causing the economy to go, and they are. So there's no arguing about that.
Yeah. Pastor Iverson Jackson, I appreciate it. I want to remind everybody you're going to be in Jonesboro Tuesday, October 22nd, 6:30,
Yes, sir.
First National Bank Community Room, at this Quest for Quality of Life event hosted by State Representative Dan Sullivan. I know it's going to be a great event, and I know you're certainly going to provide and make the conversation very interesting, and I really appreciate you spending some time with us this morning, sir.
Well, thank you, Paul. It's always great to talk with you, be on your program, and just keep it going, man. We love it.
All right.
We love it.
Okay. Thank you so much, Pastor Jackson. We appreciate you.